Afternoon. It's Sunday, the 2nd of July. I was just watching a girl take the political compass test. I thought her answers were ridiculous sometimes. Sometimes I agreed with her. Um, Decided I wanted to make a video of myself taking the political compass test because why not? Alright. If economic globalization is inevitable, it should primarily serve humanity rather than the interests of transnational corporations. I'm going to disagree with that because, from an economic standpoint, typically, provided that companies are behaving within a certain set of guidelines, and I think the laws we have now in the United States are appropriate guidelines for company behaviors, and probably they're too much, but as long as they're behaving rationally within certain guidelines, their personal interests, their corporate interests are going to align with human interests. I'd always support my country, whether it was right or wrong. I strongly disagree with that. It's not so much my country that I love necessarily, so much as the principles that were uh, the foundation for its inception. No one chooses his or her country of birth, so it's foolish to be proud of it. I'll agree with that. Our race has many superior qualities compared with other races. There's no neutral option here. It's strongly disagree, disagree, agree, or strongly agree. This isn't something that I think about ever. I guess disagree. It's really an irrelevant point to me. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. I'm going to disagree with that. I can see how sometimes you would align yourself with somebody who you might not, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're your friend. Military action that defies international law is sometimes justified. I don't love the idea of international law to begin with, so I'm going to agree. There's now a worrying fusion of information and entertainment. I disagree with that strongly. I would rather enjoy the information that is being presented to me. So people are ultimately divided more by class than by nationality. I strongly disagree with that. Controlling inflation is more important than controlling unemployment. I'm going to agree with that, not strongly, but I'm going to agree with that. Because corporations cannot be trusted to voluntarily protect the environment, they require regulation. I'm going to agree, not strongly, again. I think many corporations realize that it's in their interest to not utterly destroy the forests that they're using for lumber. From each according to his ability to each according to his need is a fundamentally good idea. Maybe philosophically, maybe if, well, certainly if, Jesus were to come again and we had this perfect omnipotent being who is also all-knowing and is able to make the concept of scarcity scarce, then yeah, awesome. From each according to his ability to each according to his need. But that's not the world we live in. We live in an imperfect world, and so I disagree with that, especially on economic terms. It's a sad reflection on our society that something as basic as drinking water is now a bottled, branded consumer product. I strongly disagree with that. The fact is that bottled water has a lot of benefits. Probably unintended benefits, but benefits to especially third world countries. Access to clean water. land shouldn't be a commodity to be bought and sold. I strongly disagree with that. Personal property, including land, is fundamental to a well-functioning free society. It is regrettable that many personal fortunes are made by people who simply manipulate money and contribute nothing to their society. Again, strongly disagree. The idea of a middleman is vastly misunderstood and underrated. Protectionism is sometimes necessary in trade. Again, strongly disagree. I am of a libertarian bent, free market economics bent. I'm a student of economics, and I've studied trade a little bit, but it's pretty much it's almost a universally accepted notion in the field of economics that the freer the trade, the better. The only social responsibility of a company should be to deliver a profit to its shareholders. Well, if they're in business, then their goal is to make a profit. So yeah, that's their goal. Doesn't mean that we don't benefit by them making a profit. Doesn't mean that because their shareholders are happy, we can't be happy. So I'm going to strongly agree with that one. The rich are too highly taxed. Strongly agree. And by the way, I make $20,000 a year. I am, by American standards, not rich. Those with the ability to pay should have access to higher standards of medical care. I strongly agree. The fact is that the rich having access to quality of care that is higher than maybe what is available to the rest of us, that serves eventually to make that higher quality of care the standard quality of care. Governments should penalize businesses that mislead the public. Yeah, I agree. That's one of those things that the government functions to do. It's protect consumers, protect businesses by creating a framework within which businesses and consumers can interact on mutually agreeable terms. So if I'm being misled, yeah, I have some problem with a company. A genuine free market requires restrictions on the ability of predator multinationals to create monopolies. By definition, a genuinely free market does not have restrictions. So, from a definitional standpoint, no, but I disagree. Is there some benefit to be gained by preventing monopolization? Maybe. Economists are kind of up and down on that one. Recently, they've kind of, at least in the case of natural monopolies, started to realize that restricting or regulating natural monopolies a lot is not actually good. It makes things worse than they could be. I think categorically it's not necessary to regulate monopolies. I'm kind of torn on this one. I'm going to say disagree. The freer the market, the freer the people. Strongly agree. That goes back to that. The government should just get out of the way. Abortion, when the woman's life is not threatened, should always be illegal. Not always. I'm very pro-life. I believe that protecting the unborn innocent is as much a function of a free society as protecting the life of an individual who has matured in age. So I'm going to disagree with that one. Again, there's no other option other than agree and disagree. All authority should be questioned. I agree. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to disagree with the authority, but it is good to understand why things are done a certain way. Customs, for example, Friedrich Hayek argued that we have certain customs in our society as a result of hundreds or thousands of years of cultural evolution, and we can't just discard those because, in 1 or 2 generations, because, well, they're the result of a lot of people seeing the benefits of those customs. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. I disagree. There should be on both sides of the political spectrum, there should be broad support, I guess, for mercy. I'm not extremely eloquent. I would hope that people who may listen to this would forgive me for that, instead of ragging on me. The internet, unfortunately, is full of people who all they like to do is criticize. And that's not conducive to civil society. You should be able to criticize, but you should be civil about it. Taxpayers should not be expected to prop up any theaters or museums that cannot survive on a commercial basis. I'm going to agree. The way that I use my money for personal reasons is different from how the government wants to use my money. And if I don't want to spend my money on a museum directly, then I don't want to spend it indirectly either. Schools should not make classroom attendance compulsory. I probably don't know about enough, or haven't thought enough about this to really have an opinion. I don't love the idea of compulsion, though, so I'm going to say disagree, or agree, rather. All people have their rights, but it is better for all of us that different sorts of people should keep to their own kind. Philosophically, I disagree. People have their rights. There's no caveat to that. If I want to freely associate with someone that you don't like, that's my business and not yours, and you have nothing to say about that. So I'm going to strongly disagree. Good parents sometimes have to spank their children. I got spanked. I'm fine. I think there's a lot to be said for teaching rather than, physical response, punishment. But I also think that it's not my decision for everyone. So in my case, I'm going to say agree. I may never spank my kids, but I have the option. It's natural for children to keep some secrets from their parents. From an evolutionary standpoint, yeah, probably. Again, it's where that is outside of my sphere of influence, it doesn't concern me. If your kids are keeping secrets from you, that's on you. Possessing marijuana for personal use should not be a criminal offense. I strongly agree with that. There are too many negative consequences as a result of prohibition that any attempt to prohibit drugs really, the negatives outweigh the positives. It's not worth it. Now, I'm not condoning drug use. I'm just very personally against it. I live by a religious code of health, and I generally don't associate people with people who do, but I do have some friends who do. I don't go out of my way to seek those kinds of people out, but if they want to do drugs, that's on them, as long as they're not hurting someone or destroying property. The prime function of schooling should be to equip the future generation to find jobs. Disagree. The prime function of schooling should be to teach kids how to think, not what to think, but how to think. And if kids are taught how to think, then they can prepare themselves for jobs. People with serious inheritable diseases should not be allowed to reproduce. I would not support legislation that made it illegal for you to reproduce if you have HIV. The most important thing for children to learn is to accept discipline. To accept discipline, maybe not to, maybe the most important thing for kids to learn is discipline itself. I would kind of agree with that. There are probably things that are more important, but one of the most important things is to learn discipline. But to accept discipline, I think the most important thing for kids is to learn. So I'm gonna disagree with this one based on the wording. There are no savage and civilized people. There are only different cultures. I don't believe in the idea that all cultures are created equal. That's a bogus idea. If one culture teaches that the genders are equal in status before the law, that is certainly superior to a culture that teaches that women are objects whose only purpose is for sexual gratification. So I'm going to disagree. Those who are able to work and refuse the opportunity should not expect society's support. I'll agree with that. If you have the ability and you just choose not to, you've kind of forfeited any expectation of support. When you are troubled, it's better not to think about it, but to keep busy with more cheerful things. I mean, to some extent, think happy, be happy. But if you've got a problem that is going to continue and get worse over time, then no. With that in mind, I'll disagree. First-generation immigrants can never be fully integrated within their new country. The question is irrelevant. I don't care. I mean, you know, it may be, especially if they refuse to learn the language. If, for example, I were to move to Russia and just refuse to learn Russian, I shouldn't expect everyone to bend over backwards to speak English to me. And so I'm undercutting my potential for growth and for success, but that's on me, you know. If I decide I want to fully integrate, well, that's on me again. So it really depends on them. I'm going to disagree because it's an individual's question, not a group question. And many questions are individual questions that we frame as group questions, and I think that's a mistake. What's good for the most successful corporations is always ultimately good for all of us. Always, ultimately, no. I think it tends to be that as businesses succeed, that people are better off. But what's good for the most successful corporations may be political favoritism, and that is not ultimately good for all of us, so I'm going to disagree. No broadcasting institution, however independent its content, should receive public funding. I strongly agree. If I wouldn't pay for it up front, I shouldn't pay for it from behind. Our civil liberties are being excessively curbed in the name of counterterrorism. I strongly agree. The TSA should not be allowed to grope me to see if I have a bottle of water. They're not even good at their job to begin with. And, you know, it's nothing on the individuals, but the organization, it sucks. A significant advantage of a one-party state is that it avoids all the arguments that delay progress in a democratic political system. In the event that they actually hit upon some legislation or idea that is beneficial for everyone and does not create circumstances in which one, or rather favors one group over another, well, yeah, I mean, but we don't live in that world. More often than not, and I'd say probably 99% of the time, a one-party state will abuse its citizens. Is it an advantage, a significant advantage? Maybe, but again, in that, you know, second coming millennial Jesus is here ruling all of this world. But until then, no. Although the electronic age makes official surveillance easier, only wrongdoers need to be worried. Strongly disagree. I put a little sticker over my webcam when I'm not using it because even though I'm a law-abiding citizen and I care a lot about doing what is right, it's still none of the government's business what I'm doing in my own home. And unfortunately, the record of history shows that even otherwise good governments can abuse their citizens. The death penalty should be an option for the most serious crimes. This one I struggle with. I like what Ron Paul said, that in a free society, and I'm paraphrasing, but in a free society, you can't really call a society free if the government has the right to kill its citizens. On the other hand, though, people like Ted Bundy, I don't know. I've never verified the assertion that Ron Paul makes in his book Liberty Defined that it is more costly to kill someone than it is to keep them in jail for their whole lives. So I can't use that as a basis for my decision. Until I've really decided, I'm going to say disagree, because I don't love the idea of the state being able to decide to kill me. In a civilized society, one must always have people above to be obeyed and people below to be commanded. I disagree. I'm not an anarchist, but you can get along with people without having to be told what to do. Abstract art that doesn't represent anything shouldn't be considered art at all. This is irrelevant to any kind of policy, and I really don't care. I'm going to say disagree, because there are things that are not lifelike that I enjoy looking at. In criminal justice, punishment should be more important than rehabilitation. No. It is a waste of time to try to rehabilitate some criminals. It's the word "some" there that gets me, because most criminals probably can be rehabilitated, but some criminals, Ted Bundy, probably can't. So I'm going to agree on that one, even though I disagreed on the last one. The business person and the manufacturer are more important than the writer and the artist. That again is an individual question. If I had the time and cared to think enough about it, I would consider what benefits I gain from each of those. I'm going to say I disagree. I get I receive benefits from all of those people. Mothers may have careers, but their first duty is to be homemakers. Homemakers. If by homemaker they mean a woman's responsibility is to her family, I actually agree with that. I think that mothers should be allowed to pursue a career, but it's important to society that children be raised. Well, it's important to society that children be raised with both parents in a stable married relationship. But that's not anything I'm going to legislate. And it's really up to the individual. But if by homemaker they mean that women should spend all their day, every day at home, no. I'm going to assume that the question is referring to the rearing of children and say agree. But that is a moral duty, a moral obligation, not a legal obligation. There's an important distinction there. Multinational companies are unethically exploiting the plant genetic resources of developing countries. I disagree. Individuals who work for these companies in third world or developing nations are benefiting from the transaction. Making peace with the establishment is an important aspect of maturity. I, again, disagree. Galileo didn't make peace with the establishment, and he was right to do so, or right not to do so. Astrology accurately explains many things. Strongly disagree. Astrology has no bearing on empirical reality. You cannot be moral without being religious. I'm going to disagree with that. I think being religious helps. Certainly some religious people are nut jobs and are immoral in their moralizing. But I know non-religious people who are moral without being religious. Charity is better than Social Security as a means of helping the genuinely disadvantaged. The libertarian in me wants to say yes. The pragmatic individual isn't so convinced. The economist in me says, well, government spending crowds out private charity. And so this is a tough question. Reading it as charity is better in terms of I would say that yes, because taking money from someone under the threat of force to give to someone else who needs help is not the same as freely giving of yourself. I don't know how that would translate into real-world events. Some people are naturally unlucky. I would disagree with that. I mean, maybe if you consider it in the way that, or in terms of being born in the inner city versus being born in the suburbs, yeah, you're unlucky. Sorry, your prospects from the get-go are not as awesome. Maybe I'll change my answer to agree on that one. There's no neutral position here. It is important that my child's school instills religious values. No. It's important to me that my child has religious values, but those are to be taught in the home. I see no problem with a school being able to teach religious values if they want. Just like schools are teaching certain things that some parents don't like, and the parents can deal with those things at home. I think schools as an institution should be independent. The federal government really shouldn't have much to say about what goes on in schools. It is important that my child's, I just read that, so I disagree with that. Sex outside marriage is usually immoral. Yes, I happen to agree with that, but that doesn't mean I would legislate it. You can disagree with me on that, and that's fine. We can disagree, and we can still be civil. But from my perspective as a religious individual, yeah, you should wait until marriage to have sex. And really, the empirical data is starting to show you are most likely to be happy, prosperous, and in a long-term relationship if you only ever have sex with one person, and if you wait until marriage to have sex with that person. A same-sex couple in a stable, loving relationship should not be excluded from the possibility of child adoption. Here, the religious individual in me and the libertarian in me are a little bit at odds. But I really take issue with the idea of the state telling me what I can and cannot do in terms of my family. So I imagine if I were in a same-sex relationship, I would not appreciate being told, no, you cannot adopt a child. So I'll agree with that. Pornography depicting consenting adults should be legal for the adult population. Legal, yes. Is it immoral? Yes. I absolutely think that. But it should be legal. Making it illegal does not do anybody any good. Again, I don't condone pornography, whether it's manufacturing it or taking it in. It's bad. It destroys families. But, and if you disagree, that's fine. We can be civil about it. But it's really another instance of individuals being able to choose. What goes on in a private bedroom between consenting adults is no business of the state. Strongly agree. No one can feel naturally homosexual. I disagree with that. I think from an evolutionary standpoint, obviously homosexuality doesn't tend to perpetuate itself very well, especially in the general population, but I know people that are naturally inclined to be attracted to others. It doesn't mean I feel like it's okay, from a moral standpoint, but I think they naturally feel homosexual, and I wouldn't pass any laws to make that kind of behavior illegal. These days, openness about sex has gone too far. I would agree with that. There are certain things that I would prefer my kids not be exposed to until I feel like they're ready. And that is my purview. That is my decision, not anyone else's, other than my wife. Okay, now let's see where you stand. Okay, it's giving me all this explanation. Alright. Your political compass. Economic left/right, 6.38. Social libertarian/authoritarian, negative 3.28. That puts me in the bottom right quadrant, purple. So right and libertarian, and that's not surprising. I have considered myself a libertarian for a couple of years now. I registered officially as a libertarian, even though the party isn't awesome as parties are wont to be. But, and that's another story entirely, but I've considered myself philosophically libertarian for at least the last few years of my life. Well, that was my taking of the political compass test. If you made it all the way through this video, you are a very tenacious individual. I would recommend taking this, thinking about the issues. You don't have to agree with me, you don't have to receive the same results in order to be my friend or to be somebody that I admire, respect, or look up to. But certainly, and I don't see myself as someone who has all the answers. I'm very opinionated and I feel very strongly about things. Obviously, I don't feel strongly about everything. Several of these questions I was just almost ambivalent about, but take the test, see where you stand, and please, the next time you have a political conversation, be civil about it. It's okay to disagree. It's okay to have differences of opinion. It doesn't mean that the other person is equally correct. If you objectively hold A, B, and C to be true, and they are objectively true, and they hold C, D, and E to be true, well, they've got C right, but D and E are wrong. But it doesn't make them less of a person or worth any less or anything like that. That's it.